Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. This afternoon we are going to talk about conditional sentences. Conditional sentences are also called ifs or if sentences. Someone will ask, why are they called so? Why are they called conditional sentences? They are called conditional sentences because there's a certain condition that has to be fulfilled in order to produce a result. For example, I may come up with a sentence like this: if I get money, I will buy a car. If I get money, I will buy a car. Buying a car is a result of getting money. So in this sentence, the condition is getting money. Once money is got, buying a car will be the result. You may also say, if I got money, I would buy a car. Or another way of saying this could be, if I had got money, I would have bought a car. So these three sentences tell us the three different if conditional sentences we have. Therefore, we have if 1, if 2, and if 3. Or one can say if 1 sentences, if 2 sentences, or if 3 sentences. I want you to understand that each conditional sentence has 2 parts. And these 2 parts are the if clause and the main clause. Allow me to say something briefly about these 2 clauses. We are beginning with the if clause. An if clause is that condition that is fulfilled. Is that condition that needs to be fulfilled for the result to come out. And then when we come to the main clause itself is the result. That outcome. What comes out after the condition has been fulfilled. You also need to know that a sentence, a conditional sentence, can either begin with the main clause or the main clause. I repeat, you need to know that a conditional sentence can either begin with an if clause or a main clause. When you start a conditional sentence with an if clause, you must apply a comma to separate those 2 clauses, to separate the if clause from the main clause. For example, if I get money, you have to pause there, and where you pause is where you place a comma. Then what will be the result? The result will be I will buy a car. So buying a car is the result that comes in the main clause. You can also start your sentence with the main clause. Once you start your sentence with the main clause, you don't need a comma in your sentence. You start the sentence with the main clause, you will end it with an if clause. If you start a sentence with an if clause, you must end it with the main clause, but a comma has to be applied there. I said there are 3 different types of if sentences or conditional sentences. We have if 1, if 2, and if 3. Let me say something briefly about if 1. If 1 is also known as an open or likely conditional. If 1 is also known as open or likely conditional. We use if 1 to talk about events or situations which are possible but not certain. For example, we can say if he asks me, I will help him. Yes, you are very willing to help, but you've not been asked. if he asks me, I will help him. This sentence, or the condition in this sentence, can be fulfilled. You can help if at all you are asked. But if you are not asked, you're not ready to go and help. So they call it likely or an open conditional. Then we have if to, or if to conditional. If to talks about events, things, or situations which are not likely to happen. If to talks about events, things, or situations which are not likely to happen. They are imaginary situations. You just imagine a situation. For example, I'm changing the first sentence there to if to now. If he asked me, I would help him. Your friend is being beaten seriously by a very little boy, and you're there. All you want him to do is to ask you for help. But he is there fighting, struggling for his life. And you just come up with this imagination that if at all he asked you, then you would be there to help him. That is if to conditional. When we come to if 3, you have talked about the imagined results of an event or situation that did not happen. I repeat, if 3 talks about imagined results of an event, things or situations that did not happen. They are called unfulfilled or rejected conditions. For example, you can say, if he had asked me, I would have helped him. If he had asked me, I would have helped him. What does this sentence mean? The sentence means he did not ask you for help, and therefore you did not help him. So it is a rejected. The condition was not fulfilled, and the result did not come out. You also need to know that if 3 can be presented in 2 ways. Sometimes we can begin an if 3 question, an if 3 sentence with had. Saying that same sentence in this different way is also very, very correct. For example, one can say, had he asked me for help, I would have helped him. This sentence again means the very way the other one meant. That he did not ask for help, and therefore you did not help him. I want to talk briefly about the tenses in those 3 different if conditional sentences, beginning with if 1. We earlier on said that each conditional sentence has 2 parts, and the 2 parts are the if clause and the main clause, where we said the if clause is the condition that needs to be fulfilled, and the main clause is the result that comes after the condition has been fulfilled. Therefore, we have the condition in the if clause, and the result is always placed in the main clause. So what happens in if 1? In if 1, we have our if clause, and in that if clause, you are expected to use the present simple of the main verb. That's why we have if he asks me. Then we go to the main clause that says, I will help him. If he asks me, I will help him. I will help him becomes a result that comes after someone has asked you to help them. So in our main clause, we are going to put future simple. And when we talk of the future simple, we are basically talking about the two helping verbs that we use in the future tense. We have the use of will or shall. That is in if 1. When we come to if 2, in the if clause, we get the past simple of the given main verb. Like our main verb given in the if clause is ask. So the past simple of ask is asked. Then we go to the main clause where we have the future simple. Will or shall. There, you change that will or the shall that has been given there to would. We call it conditional. Then after would, still you bring your the infinitive form of the main verb. Would help. Don't say would helped. No, it is would help. So the whole sentence will be, if he asked me, I would help him. Then coming to if 3, in the if clause, we place the past perfect. The past perfect has the helping verb had plus the past participle of the main verb. Our main verb is still asked. So there we are going to put the helping verb had plus the past participle of ask, which is asked. Had asked. When you say had asked, you've come up with the past perfect. So that becomes, if he had asked me. If he had asked me. Then you place a comma there. You will say, I would have helped him. I would have helped him. So we have would have that comes in the main clause. And what comes after would have is the past participle of the main verb we have in the main clause. That is help. So that one will be would have helped. So the whole sentence will be, if he had asked me, I would have helped him. Last but not least, you can begin your sentence with an if clause. And each time you begin a sentence with an if clause, there must be a comma. You can as well start your sentence with the main clause. And the situation where your sentence begins with the main clause, you don't need to put a comma in between. Don't separate the main clause from the if clause using a comma once your sentence begins with the main clause. In summary, we have said that conditional sentences have two parts. And the two parts we talked about, one is the if clause. And we said the if clause itself is the condition that needs to be fulfilled. We also talked about the main clause, where we said the main clause has the result that comes out after the condition has been fulfilled. Down here we have the different changes that occur when we are talking about if conditional sentences. Like we said, if 1 is known as open or likely conditional. And we said if 1 has two clauses, and you can see the two clauses here, the if clause and the main clause. In if 1 we have the present simple of the main verb that is given, and the main clause we have future simple. When we are talking about future simple, we talked of the two helping verbs, will or shall. We moved to if 2, where we said an if 2 is also known as unlikely conditional. Unlikely conditional. The verb in the if clause here changes to past simple. And in the main clause we have conditional would. And lastly, we have if 3 that we said is also known as rejected or unfulfilled conditional. So in the if clause, when we are dealing with if 3, we have the past perfect. And what do we do to come up with the past perfect? We need the helping verb had plus the past participle of the verb that you will be given. Like in those sentences we talked about, the main verb given has been ask, and the past participle of ask is asked. So when you put had plus asked, you come up with the past perfect of that. Then the main clause, we have perfect conditional. That's the use of would have, and what comes after have is the past participle of the main verb. These are the things that you shouldn't forget when you are coming up with the sentences. You need to start your sentence with a capital letter. You need to apply all the necessary punctuation marks and read through your work. When you're writing, write neatly. Thank you very much.